You've said the future's going to be epic. You're really optimistic about it when a lot of people are pretty worried. How come?
I think people have had a tendency to be worried about the future because humans are programmed to be that way. We always were worried about some predator coming around the corner and eating us. Like we're tuned to survive, right? So we're tuned to there's always some existential threat to humanity. This goes back to kind of biblical eras, thousands of years ago. It was the Great Flood that was about to come. There was the plague. The plague's going to wipe us all out. There's starvation. The late 19th century population was outstripping food supply. And there was this big belief that we were going to run out of food. And there was this kind of rush and the primary reason was all the world's fertilizer actually came from these guano fields off of the South American coast. So these giant islands covered in poop. And the clipper ships would go down, they'd get all this poop and they'd bring it back to Europe and they'd use it as fertilizer to farm. If you don't have fertilizer, you get less yield, less calories. So the islands were kind of diminishing and there was this big call to action. We're going to run out of fertilizer. The world's going to starve. We're going to die. And then there was this invention called the Haber process where they figured out how to take nitrogen from the atmosphere, compress it, and make fertilizer. Boom. Suddenly population skyrocketed. Every generation has these existential threats, climate change, COVID. There's always, and now it's AI. I think fundamentally AI is one of these most kind of like mind-numbing.
Yeah, this is such a good way to frame it. Every generation thinks the sky is falling, and every generation is wrong. The Haber process saved billions of lives, and nobody even knows what it is.
Sort of unbelievable to understand kind of technologies. And when these kind of things happen that we don't fully grok, that seems so overwhelming, like a plague, like running out of food, like COVID, we have a tendency to be very existential about it. Now, you compare that to the facts on the ground. The facts on the ground, people are living longer, they're living healthier, they're living better lives across the board, across populations. And people can argue all day long about relative prosperity. Hey, some people in America have gotten really far ahead. They're doing really well. The rest of us feel left behind. But if you look at some of the metrics of like, hey, everyone has a home, everyone has a car, like everyone has some of these things that we take for granted today that we didn't have 100 years ago, that were really things to struggle to get. Now, separate to that, there's an extraordinary compounding effect happening in technology generally. Digitization of the physical world, and then our ability to kind of make predictions about the future and engineer a different future because of the tools that we call AI today. But it's really a long history of these sorts of tools where we take data and we use that to better understand the world and then say, hey, we could do this or we could do this. We could make this molecule to solve this cancer. We could do this thing and suddenly it turns out we're right. We could build this machine that could get us to the moon. Oh yeah, we're right. We could do that. Like all of these fundamental tools start to compound. And we're in this kind of exponential curve right now that I think, and we can talk about some of the things that I think are most exciting, but that are really going to kind of transform the trajectory for humanity. So I think that there's a risk of too much change too fast, which is perhaps the thing that breaks social order. And that's probably the phase that we're in right now.
This is the key insight right here. The West has more to lose. That's why we're so scared of AI while China's going full speed ahead. We're playing defense and we should be playing offense.
Like, how much is the social order going to break? How hard is it going to be for people to adapt? How much of a dislocation will there be in social systems and economic systems? And people's expectations, when they shift too much and they have to kind of rethink, what do I have to do? They want to put a break on things. And I think that's kind of a moment that we're in the West right now. In the East, it's a little bit different. You go to China, they're very much embracing these technologies because there's so much more to gain than there is to lose. In the West, we have so much more to lose than there is to gain. So,
oh, that's interesting. Yeah. A victim of your own success so far.
Yeah.
Because it feels like you've climbed pretty high, and if you fall, that could be bad.
You have more to lose.
Yeah.
And we could pontificate on this for a while, but you could go back to FDR in the United States, and we kind of came out of the war with this big effort where we said, hey, we can aggregate all our resources, we can win World War II. And then we said, by aggregating our resources, we could do the extraordinary. So let's do that again, and let's keep doing that. And that became this kind of trajectory we've been on in terms of making promises for tomorrow and then having the government kind of deliver the promises, right? And that's been a big thing that's gone on for the last, call it almost 100 years, particularly in the West. At some point, you can only promise so much. Like there's a system where everyone had this sort of expectation setting that was made. Okay, everyone gets a home. That's the American dream. Everyone goes to college and then they get a job. Some of those things may not necessarily be the right things from a free market perspective, in which case you're making these promises and then people feel like the promises aren't being delivered, they're not being met, and that's all they care about and that's all that they want. In the West, we have that problem right now. And so there's a lot of these things that we've set expectations around. If you go to college, you get a good degree, no matter how much it costs, you will have a good job and you'll be able to buy a home and live a good life. And that's not true anymore. And so these are the sorts of things that I think make...
Yeah, he's absolutely right about the broken promises. Go to college, get a degree, buy a house. That deal is basically dead. And people are pissed about it, and rightfully so. But the answer isn't to stop progress.
Us more fearful of the changes ahead. Whereas in the East, those promises weren't necessarily made. They're like in China, GDP per capita skyrocketed from 3,000 to 30,000 in just a couple of years. I mean, imagine seeing the average person's income in a country go up by 10x, and everyone's moving from farms to villages to cities, and the cities are like the future. Like it's been an extraordinary trajectory. So, there's a lot of embracing of the future that's happening in one set of social systems in the world today. And then a bunch of this like, oh my God, tomorrow is scary. It's going to break everything on the other side. And I think, we have that very dangerous kind of choice to make.
I think the concern is that AI is a difference of kind, not just a difference of degree, that there is a centralizing of power amongst potential 5 trillionaire class people on the planet. And what sort of control do they have? How much displacement is there of work that didn't happen in the same way as when horses were killed because the automobile came along, or because manual labor needed to turn into driving JCBs instead of digging holes?
Yeah.
That this is a difference of